Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's a beautiful day for all of us, and we're happy that all of you are here with us for today's session, our webinar on how to navigate talent management, both during and after COVID. We are privileged this morning to have with us a fantastic speaker, and I'm happy that she is able to join us. But before I introduce her to
Yeah.
you, let me just say a few words to our audience today. Welcome, and I hope everyone is well settled. Looking forward to a great conversation. We have some people here who have signed in all the way from Singapore. Hello, Situ. We
Okay.
also have people from our chapters nationwide, so it's a good crowd that we have today. Just a few reminders for everyone who's listening in today. We will be projecting our webinar today, not just on Zoom, but also on YouTube. For those who are on Zoom, please feel free to send in your questions via the Zoom chat box. And we will be taking them up as we go along. I believe today we're going to have a very interactive session. For those who are interested to get a copy of the speaker slides, they are available to PMUP members. But for those who would like to request for it and have concerns about it, please feel free to email our membership coordinator, Ms. Rhea Padagsa. Her email will be flashed on screen after this session. Right, so I'm sure we're all excited to hear from our speakers. So let me introduce her to you. Ms. Thelma Meneses is a very senior human resource practitioner, senior not just in years, but in terms of experience, over 30 plus in very high quality roles, heading HR in top 100 global corporations like Coca-Cola, Eastman Kodak, Mead Johnson, AstraZeneca, Unilever are some of the brands that she's worked with. Today, she is with us as somebody who is giving back to the HR community in terms of what she has learned and what she has picked up in terms of wisdom through the years. A lot of her experience has been in leading organizational transformation, and most of this have been in times of crisis. So very appropriate for our discussion today. Her experiences has opened up for her a number of speaking engagements, PMUP for one with us today, on human resource management and on women empowerment. She also has published quite a number of articles. We also have people I'd like to recognize from other associations. We have the president of ICF Philippines with us, Alma Horn. Good morning to you and to your team of coaches. I believe everyone is excited to learn from Ms. Thelma Meneses. So here she is. Friends, please welcome Ms. Thelma Meneses. Let's give her a virtual clap.
Yay!
Well,
Thank you so much, Lynn. I am humbled with the introduction you gave me, and the reality is that the more you get involved in people-related programs, the more you get humbled that you know very little, on what are those things that we need to do
mhm,
as HR professionals and help every organization we are with, on how can we drive the best human capital. I look at it as human capital, both from a business perspective and from a country perspective, because that's the leading asset of any organization, whether it's, the family unit, the barangay, the
yeah,
country, and even in the organization. It's really all about people.
yeah,
So,
indeed.
what I intend to do is to share with you a very layman's uh, presentation.
Mhm,
I know, and I was sharing it with some of you guys earlier, that, I don't want to underestimate the things that you have already heard, the things that you have already been doing, uh, because this is nothing new to us. All of us have been through OD, organizational transformation, and we have a lot of those things. We have a proliferation of so many materials about this COVID, and so it's not like this is the first time we're hearing this. So what I'm gonna share is really just more of a gentle reminder of what exactly are those things, because we are, I think, HR professionals are having data overload. What are those data? So what's in it for us? So what? It's really the question of, given all of this information we have, so what? What are we going to do in HR? How can we help in the most tangible way that people will immediately feel? We can't, while we are looking at, big ticket items in order for us to transform the business, and those are sexy things, but we need to also start looking at, what can we do now? What are the things that we can achieve and be felt easily by people? So what I'm gonna share with you are those very practical things that, I think I have, I'd like to share with you. But more so, the participants can actually share what they're doing, something that is tangible, something that we can all embrace and say, we can touch it. Okay, so
So we're going to have a very interactive session, Thelma.
absolutely,
Right?
absolutely. So this is not like, the intellectual capital doesn't sit with me. It sits with the 242 participants that we have. So okay, I think this is the last slide. Can we start with, the first slide that we have? So okay, let's move first. This is my last slide. Okay. So let's do the first one, the slide one. So while we're doing that, so let me give you the agenda. Number one, there are three things just so that the brain can only function so much. So the first agenda is setting the tone. Where are we? What is COVID? How do we define? So let's put it in our own HR speak. And then second is what's the new normal? What how do we define what is new normal? And then the third one is in the organization, what are the top three things that we should be doing? I only focus on top three because, we have to prioritize. I know we have a lot of things to do. And so putting a long laundry list of things that we would like to do may be too overwhelming for everyone. So let's just discipline ourselves to focus on top three, and then deliver under over deliver under commit, over deliver. That's something that I've learned, in my entire life. Don't promise a lot of things that, you can't deliver anyway, or if you have to do it, it's done half baked. So focus on those top three things that we're only going to be able to deliver with quality, and then all that. So are we in? I mean, can we now flash the presentation deck? Hi, hi.
I believe our PMAP team is getting it together.
Okay, there
Here
you
you go.
go.
Yeah.
My hero, Maki. Maki, thank you. Oops. Let's start with, why is it going up?
Miss Selma,
Yes,
sometimes
Lynn.
when these things happen, two things come to my mind.
Okay.
One, there's this quote very popular from Covey: "Begin with the end in mind."
Yes,
And
yes,
that
yes, yes.
comes to my mind right now because for some reason sometimes we have technical difficulties because of our situations. And while it seems that the sequence of the slides don't seem to be getting flashed on screen according to the original plan,
Yes.
uh, why not? Come on. I mean, you're an expert in the field. I would say, why not allow this disruption to be
Exactly.
something that we could turn into a positive action, and we begin with the end in mind. And at some point, I
Absolutely.
believe the PMAP staff will be able to run the slides from the very beginning because this is your last
Okay.
slide, I know, right?
Yeah, so anyway, so let me start first with, you know, what's the new norm? Where are we in terms of COVID? And in my first slide, I am what I'm what I wanted to share with you is how COVID, according to the International Labor Organization, has impacted the global community from an economic perspective, where we all know that all businesses, small, big or small, local or international, have started to feel the economic impact of COVID. We all know that. You have probably heard that a lot of times. And the first one that was affected was the supply chain. We are no longer under this absolute advantage that everything happens in our country, and we can be independent vis-a-vis the other countries. Right now, the global supply chain has truly been, the movers, one of the critical success measure of an organization that is progressive, because we don't just rely on our own resources. We deal with China, we deal with Korea, we deal with Asian countries and European countries, and all of these things are dependent on how robust our economy is through our supply chain. Now, while because of COVID, or because of the social distancing and all of this protocols that we had, that each country has to create, limited transportation, limited travels, and all of this lockdown, our supply chain, both the supply and the demand, um, have been adversely impacted. Now, what does that mean? If those are adversely impacted, then there's a slowdown in our in our global economy, and for sure, the ones that will really feel this is not just so much on the big companies we have, because we have, big companies would definitely have more resources, but the small and medium enterprises, where they deal on a daily operation. So a lot of our participants would really come not from those big organizations that I remember when I was with Coca-Cola, and they say, you can burn Coca-Cola down in one day, and if the entire Coca-Cola facility has been burned down in a day, they can actually recover. Okay, so, oh, there you go. So, supply and demand, consumption and investment, production of goods and services are adversely impacted by this. So all businesses, regardless of sizes, are impacted. This is, as I've said, because of the travel bans and closures and quarantine measures. And then, of course, that would have an impact on consumer spending. And as you know, in our basic economic subjects before, if you're not an economist, if there's less consumer spending, then there would be an impact on, the the trade, on our commerce, our GDP, gross domestic product, because there would be less demand, less consumer spending, and that's why a lot of countries are trying to stimulate consumer spending. That's because that's how you drive economy. But if people do not want to go out, or they are constrained to go out, then that's going to be. Go ahead. Who's speaking? Yeah, so that's gonna be an issue. So next slide, please. Hello, next slide. All right, there you go. So what is our new normal? We will have to refocus on the health of our workers, because that is our primary resolve, beyond the accumulation of material wealth, beyond the accumulation of economic wealth. What happens to the people? What are we? So both government and companies and individuals, we focus on the health situation. And then we talk about jobs. We have to review the jobs available, both the unemployment and underemployment, because some of this lockdown, and I don't think COVID is going to go away. In fact, I probably have used a misnomer of after COVID, because there's no such thing as after COVID. Maybe there is such a thing as after ECQ. Okay, but COVID is here. Even though we drive, we, you know, unless we already have vaccines for that. So we will refocus on health of workers. We will review the jobs available. We will redefine the quality of work, wages, and access to social protection, work from home versus office setting, manufacturing setting, reduce work hours arrangement. All of these things are now are now on our plate, as HR heads, or as people working for human resources of an organization. What are those things that we are facing now? We have a lot of um, flexible work arrangement as a function of the ECQ. And so, what are those? So, how do we now define that while balancing what are the legal implications from a labor perspective? How do we make sure that now we have a work from home, flexible work arrangement, either on a full-time 8-hour job or on a reduced work hours? How does that look like, after ECQ? Do we go back to the normal 40-hour work week, or do we continue doing the workforce reduction? So what is our priority in the manufacturing setting? How do we make sure that even on a limited capacity, manufacturing continues to function? What are those practices that we're doing so that our people in the plant continue to work while balancing their exposure to COVID, and making sure that we follow uh, guidelines on, strict lockdown, reduce work hours arrangement, while the employees are embracing that at the moment. How can we sustain that while at the same time making sure that, for the last 45 days, at least here in the Philippines, productivity has really been down. So that's the challenge of any HR head. How do we make sure that we lead the organization in such a way that there's confidence? We give confidence to our leaders that we know what we're doing when we actually are also, struggling whether what we're doing is, right and honorable. So we will also have to rediscover the specific groups who are more vulnerable to adverse labor market outcomes. What about the young graduates? What about the people who are above 60, who they say cannot be, who are more vulnerable to health? What happens to the regular talent acquisition? Can we now look at people with connectivity as a requirement because we're doing work from home? Probably that's not an issue in first world countries, because chances are everyone has a good connectivity. Chances are they have access to very good signals, and they don't have to go out of their house to get good signals from their phone, from their mobile phones. With us, that's actually a challenge. People are moving towards telesales or e-commerce, but it's easier said than done simply because of our connectivity. So how do we? That's the new normal now. That's something that HR should start to look at, where whether or not their human capital has the connectivity capability. And then from that connectivity, how can we start relooking at jobs and our work from home, because that's really important. So those are the new normal now. This would probably be the top four priorities of HR. Any question on this before I move on?
I'm glad you raised that point, and we're giving time for our participants to ask some questions. Earlier, there was a comment about, as an HR practitioner, this is from Maria Erica Antonio, what are the documents and data needed to be presented in order to convince higher management that providing a work setup is relevant, given that they're still practicing a traditional management setup, which I think is relevant to your last point about connectivity issues, and some traditional managements may be more comfortable seeing everyone in the workplace.
Yeah. Well, this is just my personal opinion. A lot of us, not all of us, have the ticket to the game. I mean, there are a lot of times HR is struggling to be part of that, executive management group to understand and make decisions about, business models and how are we going to move forward. This, I always look at any adversity as an opportunity to move forward. I don't look at it as a barrier, but start looking at it from a better perspective. Given this crisis, instead of getting being fearful about this crisis, all HR professionals should now start looking at this as an opportunity to really have your voice heard, and talk about how the business will be sustained. That's our primary role anyway. How can the business be sustained? And we all know that employment or manpower cost is the biggest expense, you know, in any organization. So instead of looking at it as an expense, let's look at it from an investment perspective. And then we now say, how can we make sure that we secure the job, so that there's a balancing act on how do we secure the job of those people who are so afraid, that it's so hard to now get the commitment of people simply because you know they're going through this change, both personal and professional. They're finding it so difficult to work from home. There's so much challenge in balancing your working from home, but at the same time your family or your kids are actually you know getting trying to get your attention and all that. So those are all stressors. So
Right.
as an HR professional, we need to drive that either through simple assessment, or a simple pulse. Get the pulse of the organization and allow your CEO to really have a compelling reason to say, okay, I understand, Thelma, or I understand, Miss HR, this is the situation. So how can you help me? Because the CEO would definitely look at, revenue, margins, but at the same time, he also feels, how can we drive people's commitment and continue productivity at this situation? So this is where HR will come in and say, okay, given this situation, this is what we probably can do. You know,
Indeed,
it,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if
There's a related question, Thelma. I hope you don't mind
go
if
ahead,
I butt in a little bit here.
please.
From the same participant, Maria Erica Aquino,
Okay.
related to her question earlier, and to your point about being able to sustain the business. She wanted to focus on navigating talent management on the hospitality and tourism industry, for
Yes.
instance.
Hmm.
How could HR partner with the CEO to mitigate the risk to the talent into some and migrate them, or upskill or change their skill sets into something that is going to be more useful, given that this sector has already experienced so much hit in the past few months, starting
Okay.
from Taal volcano this January. So she's a little bit concerned on the recruitment activities and how we can work with our CEOs, let's say specifically in the tourism industry, and then related to that, looking at the local community in terms of creating job demands.
Okay. Um, Again, I have been with hospitality business. I've supported that, so I understand, the challenges of a hospitality business, which means that 24/7, everything is like, you have to drive it, you have to run it, all of this customer excellence program, and you simply don't have much time to upskill and develop talent. So use this as an opportunity. Again, look at it from a half-filled glass. All of this work from home arrangement, or self-quarantine that is required, especially in the hotel, hospitality business, and tourism business, since people are constrained to stop
Mhm.
working. Why don't you use this time for e-learning? Allow the people to develop more skills, because during the normal times of operations, you simply don't have enough time to talk about, how do you upskill, even as mundane as room service, the techniques on how to serve your customers with, 7 steps in serving the plate, and how many times should you be touching the utensils for, when you're serving. So all of those things can be done through an e-learning, a webinar, even character development or personality development, because that's very important in a hospitality business. Even as simple as, how do you put on makeup, so that, those are the times when we step back and focus on training. People would really appreciate that, even if they're not as productive as possible, we are continuously investing in them, so that when there is a time now to go back to the business as usual, and I certainly doubt if we're going to have a business as usual. So, it allows people to say that, hey, we never stopped learning. And this is a time for us to upskill and be prepared for the next challenges that we have. So that's one. Lynn, you want to say
Thank you very
something?
much. Yeah. There's a question that came in from YouTube. Aside, Thelma, from our 266 participants that we have on Zoom, we have several
Okay.
hundred more on YouTube. So I'd like to give recognition to them as well, if they're not
Okay.
able to sign in on Zoom. And I think this question might be answered as you go on into your next few slides. She's asking, this is Yani P. Benito from YouTube. How do you see OD work on culture building, culture management, and employee engagement in a virtual environment, which will be the new normal, as we've said?
Yes. OD work, or, culture management, is this is the best time in my view, okay, to really drive culture, to really drive the right culture in the organization. So some companies have started doing virtual forums, family forums and all that, to make sure that, you continuously you're continuously in touch with people. And so my vision is to keep your communication very, very targeted. What kind of message are you trying to give the employees? Don't give them too much hope that, you can't deliver anyway. Just be transparent about it. What are the top 3 things that they would like to hear from us? In my experience, number one is, where is the business going? Tell me the truth. Don't sugarcoat it. Are we heading towards, a decline, or and if we are, what are the things that you are doing, and how can I get help? How can I help? How can I contribute to make sure that that decline is not going to happen? People would know that. Drive the commitment. The second one is, what are you doing to protect the job security? Unionized or not, this is something that every employee would like to see. That's why they are employed, because they want to know whether their job is secured or not. So tell them what it is. And then the third one is really about, teamwork, collaboration, and continuous communication, openness, in terms of, allowing people to know that, hey, the organization is there. They're not alone. Everyone can only work if we work as a team. I think teamwork is very important in a virtual environment. Trust is also important. So drive those behaviors, and I think, it's going to be very helpful for the organization to go through this, go through this difficult time.
Thank you very much, Thelma. Have so many questions coming in
Okay.
right now, which shows
All right.
the level of engagement of our Zoom participants. And at the same time, I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk through the presentation material, because I think some of these questions that are coming in will be answered as you go along. So if it's okay with
Yeah.
you, as well as our
Sure.
participants, we'll let you move on to your next 2 to 3 slides. And then if I
Okay.
see that there are questions coming in which are not answered yet by your slides, I'll bring them up again. Would that be good?
Okay. That would be
All right,
great.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Lynn. So let me move on to the next slide. Okay. So Well, I've mentioned that already, so we can move on to the succeeding one. So, where will most organization head towards during and post ECQ? So, start uh, reskilling yourselves as an HR. What does remote work look like? Create policies and guidelines and procedures on how do you operationalize, work from home. It's during the early weeks of remote from or work from home. It's easy to say, okay, so everyone goes through this and then all that, but if it's going to become the norm, HR should start thinking, what are the policies and procedures? Look at systems. This is where HR's capability around systems and policies and procedures, start embracing that. Try to outline, what does it mean for my company? What does remote work look like? And you're not alone. There are a lot of practitioners. I am willing to give you, definitions and all that. And Miss Lean, PMAP has a lot of uh, resources to talk about, how do they define work from home? What are the policies and procedures? And then at the same time, start thinking about, what are those programs that you will be looking at on productivity programs? How can you sustain productivity? I would look at it from a performance management perspective. Try to create now new standards for people so that they know what good looks like. Okay, while working from home, it's not enough to just say hi and hello, or so it's very important that you have a tracking mechanism on where they're doing. You have a clear expectations that they know what good looks like. So what are those key performance indicators? So we all know that. So, and then create some productivity programs about, how can we recognize people who are working on that one. Culture of collaboration is key. Okay, no matter where we are in the organization, or no matter what industry we are in, collaboration is critical, especially in a virtual environment. So family work management is also something that we need to start looking at, because, as I've said, this is a challenge. Young mothers who have 1 year old or less than, toddlers and all that, now that they see their mommies working from home, I'm sure they would start, bothering the kid, the parents, and, or even, when you, even yourself, how do you make sure that you learn how to stop? You don't work from home and work for 24 hours simply because you're at home. You also have to know when to start and when to stop. And then most importantly, people are 95% going through stress, going through depression. What are your mechanisms in order for you to address this? Mental health is something that the new normal would have to focus on. So this is very important, because everyone, especially, I'm hearing this a lot. If before COVID, mental health is already an issue, what more now? So there are so many ways on how to address that without necessarily, spending so much. So I like to share some of the things that I'm doing, but at the same time, I encourage the participants to also share what they have been doing to drive mental health. In my mind, those are the top 5 priorities of HR, or of any organization. Productivity to drive the business, remote work to sustain the business, collaboration to drive, uh, our ability to attract, retain, and motivate people. Family work management and management stress is really about addressing the work disruptions, the work stressors, so that people can continue to drive productivity. Okay? Any question on that one?
There's one that's related to that, the 5 points that you raised, Thelma. No? We're talking about productivity programs. And in a lot of organizations, their experience is that they're going through work reduction initiatives because businesses slow down. This question is from Richard Amores on our question and answer chat box. So in relation to work reduction initiatives, just to sustain the business, people end up competing to be considered essential, because it's the
Mhm.
critical roles that would most likely be retained. Now, how might management be able to objectively manage this internal competition of justifying roles in the organization so that we still retain our culture of collaboration?
Okay. First and foremost, um, I think the essential and non-essential to me is a bit this, you know, it's disconcerting and it drives demotivation because you try to label people from this is essential and non-essential. And right now, I think the message should be that everyone should be employable. Okay, meaning there's nothing small nor big role that you have to play, but you just need to be employable and continuously embrace new skill sets in order for you to adapt to the new demands of the business. Then that becomes an essential, if you will, because you have the right skills. So
Mhm.
continuous improvement and having this mindset of being open to continuous learning is something that would allow any talent to to improve and keep the job. So that's not even a COVID issue. It's really a talent management issue from the get-go. From the time 30 years ago, we have always been embracing that, hey, people should continuously be employable. All right, so having said that, management can actually create um, non-cash and cash reward programs to make sure that we drive the right behavior for people who are demonstrating both the behavior that we wanted them to show, and at the same time, if they're in sales, they're targeting their sales. How can we motivate them? How can we give affirmations for the right behaviors that we are expecting? Remember, let's inspect what we expect and measure and reward what the right behaviors that we wanted to give them. So it's not just about cash. There are a lot of things that we can do. In as an example, given this reduction in hours, those people who have the right behavior that you want, as an example, punctuality and attendance during their check-in, their daily check-in, you can give them more hours, instead of just giving them 4 hours a day because there's a reduction in hours. You can incentivize them and say, hey, since you're volunteering and you can actually do both logistics and operations and all that, then I can give you more hours because you are volunteering. So those types of things can actually drive productivity.
Okay, thank you very much. Before you move on to the next slide, let me just bring up this one question because it's related to the possibility of people maybe looking for jobs outside of their company as well as within their organization. Coming from one of our board of trustees, Teresita Cruz. Hi, Tess. Thank you for joining us
Hi,
today.
Tess.
She would like to hear your views on talent sharing because, as we've seen, some industries have already been adversely affected. And then there
Mhm.
are others, there may be few, they may be few, but they are needing more manpower due to increased demand. So, what do you think of talent sharing, Ms. Delma?
I am very open. There are some kinks perhaps that we need to address, like who's gonna be giving the mandatory government contributions like SSS and Pag-ibig. Where does that sit, and where does who covers for that? Maybe the liability of if this person gets an accident or not, who's accountable. Is it the primary uh, employer or the secondary employer? But that's not something that we should see as a barrier for moving forward in the company that I am with right now. Simply because this is a retail business, a lot of our employees are prevented from going to the malls and the establishments. So there are opportunities, and we are seriously considering that there are opportunities where some retailers are looking for, additional manpower for their supermarkets. So we are seriously looking at, partnering with them. Uh, to just provide, employment for some of our people who are forced, not, who cannot enter the retail establishments. I am really very open for that. And if PMAP would drive that as a program to make sure that, the fear actually from any HR is, are we violating any labor law? So if we have something that is, an industry practice and it is acceptable, then maybe even that kind of program can actually be supportive of what, to the DOLE's employment program, and they will be very open for that. So start small, one-on-one relationship with the company that you want to partner with from an employee sharing. But if it can be an industry practice where we also have a voice for nation building, that would really be great. Okay. All right. So let me now move to, so that's the so let me now move to the, okay, so let's start with, so what? So what are now the things that we are going? So I'd like to share with you some of these tools that I have created, or I wanted to share with you. There's got to be some, as I've said, to me, the most important thing is, the health or well-being of the people. And therefore, the first three are actually addressed to drive the the total well-being of any employee. And so I am an advocate of, allowing people to just uh vent their their issues. Sometimes we don't necessarily have to give them solutions. It's enough for us to be there as HR, be present, and allow them to just talk it out. Talk it out means that, you can just talk too much until you don't have any more the energy to talk. Okay, it's really about venting. And so a lot of times individuals don't talk about their issues and they bottle it up simply because uh, they feel that, they don't want to bother their loved ones. Now if HR is available and present to allow these people to just talk it out, and they just have to, and we can be more creative. We can use, an anonymous email, so that, they can just, look at it from, like a punching bag. They just provide it there, and there's no, you eliminate the fear of, being labeled or being, reprised. So uh just have a program on, I call it talk it out, not talk it up, talk it out. Okay, talk too much. Mental health webinars, from, meditation to, so there are organizations where they have 24/7 online guidance counselors, or just people to talk to. In the hospitality and gaming business, I understand, that there are mechanisms like that because of people who are getting depressed because they lost their money and all that. And so there are 24/7 online organizations who are willing to just listen to the depression, to the people who are depressed about, their gaming habits and all that. Maybe we can tap those organizations so that, and even PMAP can actually, start looking at that in terms of a 24/7 counseling, so that people would have a ready, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, if they're being bothered about it, then we can do that. Webinars is also very good. And I have come across with just two right now that I am about to implement. They just, charge 1,500 for the, for that webinar. No limit on who are the participants. That would really be impactful for, for an organization, where they will realize that, companies care. E-retreats, let's not forget that while we continue to drive the body and the mind of our employees, we need to continuously nurture their soul. There's got to be a balance on the body, the mind, and the soul. And so tap, you know, uh, virtual arrangements, webinars on providing e-retreats, so that, we continue to keep the tao whole, both body, mind, and soul. And then, of course, the tools, which I would like to share with you, you need to be savvy. And I'm learning. I'm not even. I am I am a baby boomer, and so I don't know much about Google Drive, all of this Zoom, all of this technology that our younger generations would know. So try to upskill. The baby boomers try to upskill and appreciate all this new technology, and then come up with very practical work from home planner, where you have all these plans on a weekly basis. Every department heads can submit to HR what are the work plans for each of their members of the department, number of hours, what are the things that they're supposed to be doing. So in short, that's the new normal. How do you track work, and how do you define work? Don't try to be ambiguous about it. Try to be more specific about the assignments that each member of the organization will be doing. And then give them emails. I mean, before the week is about to start, tell them that, hey, this is your work plan. You're going to do 4 hours every day. And by next week, if you change your work plan, then you need 8 hours. Um, Clarify that, so that even your payroll and your HR administration will not pull their hair and say, oh my God, I'm so challenged because I don't know anymore, the number of days that each one is driving. What about the overtime and all that? So having a work from home planner would really help you manage all of those and allow you to capture. If you don't have a system, if you have the resources for a time and attendance management, that's good for you. But a lot of companies don't have that. So try to be more practical and use some planners. Okay, new skill sets, embrace that. I always look at training as a three paths to learning. One would be the formal training. Of course, you can't have classroom training now, so use e-training, e-classroom training. But again, we all know that training and development, or developing leaders, comes from 60% on the job assignment and 30% from mentoring. So develop that. That mentoring can be done online, mobile. So HR shouldn't stop from driving programs to reach out to people by driving more mentoring program, by driving more, on the job assignment, allowing them to explore their skill sets, not limited to their departments, but allow them to just grow and try to learn to unlearn all the things that we have been doing in HR before, because there's a new normal now. Okay? So, as I was saying, talk it out. It's a support coping mechanism program. Um, and this is how it looks like. Oops. Okay, not moving. Next slide, please. Okay, so talk it out is not a substitute for professional medical help. It is an avenue where you can talk about, where when an individual can talk about personal issues, can be assured that information will be handled confidentially. Uh, it will allow them to release pent up emotions, and then it will allow the individual that they have a shoulder to cry on. Remember that in HR, our work is not a checklist. Okay. Our work is really about creating that personal bond, creating that personal engagement. It's not a shotgun approach. Our ability to drive our people agenda is um, dependent on how we touch every single individual's lives positively. Okay, but based on reason, religion, and loving kindness. I always believe in that. So it's not like, a checklist where once we have released that, then that's over. It's all about personal engagement. It's all about kumusta ka. It's all about, I can't touch you now, but I'm here. So if we develop that, even as mundane as a text blast of how are you doing, it's already more than enough for people to feel that we have a human resource. They have a human resource around them. Okay, let's try to be closer to them and really be felt. Our presence should be felt. But a talk it out program or any program that HR can should always to make sure that we also protect the company and how we represent it. It should not be a substitute for professional medical help, especially if we know that our employees have already uh, disclosed that they're going through depression or they have some mental health problems. Immediately they need medical help, and we cannot play God and play psychiatrist to raise them. It should not also be a source of grievance mechanism to raise complaints. So make sure that the talk it out program is really just about reaching out, but not necessarily creating another grievance machinery. So as HR, we know how to do that in terms of creating that process for grievance procedure. So it's not also a source of financial help for those who are in need. I have been experiencing that every time you open an opportunity for communication, you really hear about, ma'am, wala na kaming makain. Ma'am, wala na kaming pambili ng gatas. Now, that's a different program altogether, but focus on what the program is all about. It's really about listening. It's really about having a shoulder to cry on, but not necessarily an avenue to solve the problem, because that can be a separate program altogether. Okay. Next slide, please. So I won't bother you with this one. This is really just a mechanics on how to go about it. Next slide, please. So work from home, there are toolkits that you can do. And one toolkit that I'd like to share with you is the work tracker. Please, next slide. So again, this is not cast in stone. It may not even be the best, especially for those who have already systems in managing their performance. I got inspired on this weekly work tracker from, the performance management system that I created before, where you start from what are the top 7 key performance objectives of the organization, top 5 key performance objectives, from revenue to market share to financial numbers to operational excellence to people management. Now, HR also has a way of translating that into their top 5 KPOs. What I'm sharing with you is the individual KPOs or individual, yeah, key performance objectives of someone who is supporting. That's why there's a KPO line there. It's because well, of course, I took this out, and this is just an example. Every week, the work that is being done by a particular individual of a team should actually be anchored on the KPO of the department, and the department should have a key performance objective or KPO that is anchored on the total business. And therefore, people would know that what they're doing has something to do with the bigger picture. So it allows you to drive performance management. That's one. So you're hitting two birds with one stone. You're driving performance management. Number two, on a daily basis where you need to operationalize it, everything that they do is something that is anchored on the critical performance objectives of the organization. So those nice to have can be eliminated, those nice to have can be reduced. And so you focus on what needs to be done. Going back to what Miss Lean mentioned earlier about essential and non-essential, these are the things that would allow you to define what are those. I don't want to call it essential, but meaningful role or meaningful work that should be done. And those things that are important but not urgent can be set aside given this crisis. So you just need to prioritize, and that's not, an individual or an employee wouldn't have that view simply because they're just so immersed with so many things. But as heads, as leadership, as leaders of an organization, we see that we have a view of what needs to be done, what needs to be prioritized. So coming up with a work tracker that is anchored on the department's KPO and the department is anchored on the total business KPO would really help. So on a daily basis, that's what you can do as your check-in. And then at the same time, from an admin perspective, the your HR would know how to pay that out in terms of the number of hours rendered for each individual. Any question on that one?
I think you've actually just answered one of the questions that were raised by one of our attendees. She was saying that their company had to let go of a few talented people and they wanted to find out how they could manage and drive the productivity of the remaining tool. And this weekly work tracker is an excellent example, I think.
Yeah.
Um, we can keep moving so that
Okay.
we're actually going to extend for 10 minutes
Okay.
after this so that we can complete your presentation and then
Yeah.
I'll circle back to the questions.
So this is an example again of continuous communication. So when you do a work tracker, make sure that on a daily or on a weekly basis, you also um, inform the employee on what are their job assignments, how is it going to be treated, um, and all of that. So just notify the work plan. So it's all about planning and organizing the work on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. That's how simple it is. So I'm not saying this is the best. There would be other ways on how to do that. And so just make sure that HR plays a lead role in planning and organizing work deployment. Okay. Now, another one that we need to really start looking at would be the new skill set. It's not because there's a new norm, there's a lot of new skill sets that is required. And as I've said, prerequisite perhaps is connectivity. But from business model, we have to make sure that we can foresee that bricks and mortars business would probably take a slowdown in terms of business, and e-commerce would be the norm. E-distribution, e-logistics, we will adapt the same way. And these are the innovation disruption to all of this. We have experienced different business models now where we didn't see that 10 years ago. So now I think those companies who have already the infrastructure and e-commerce is already at the forefront of this new normal. So organizations now need to start embracing you know different business operating model, and how can we in HR create the roadmap in preparation for the business to embrace e-commerce. So we need to be at the very least 2 steps ahead of the business. Before they start even thinking of e-commerce, we have to start already creating the infrastructure by identifying what are the new skill sets. Okay, so I'm sharing this Google Ads specialist. I am not an AdWord person. I don't even know what Google Ads specialist is. So I just created this, and I told the e-commerce team that I am working with, what do you think? This is just your starting point. So it's not like I know it, but it's really about starting to think, allowing the people to start thinking about, oh yeah, HR, I think you're right. We need to start defining the new skill sets required for the future talent that we will need in the organization. Maybe digital marketing is something that we have heard and talked about a lot of times, but in HR, have we defined that already? Have we started looking at the structure that goes with that strategy of digital marketing, or the strategy around e-commerce? So if we are about to embrace new business models, HR should start looking at what are the work activities that will start, stop, continue, and what are those competencies required for those things that will start for the work activities that will start given this new normal. if we are ahead of the game and we can identify the quantity and quality of people we need for the new normal, we're ahead of the game, and we are certainly supporting the organization to future proof the organization for the next new normal. So that ends my webinar. That ends my session, and I'm open for more questions.
Thank you very much, Thelma. Somebody commented that these practical tools are so useful, and our audience is appreciating very much your insights on how this can be implemented. There's a question from Melody Cadelina. My concern is for the manufacturing industry and services. Our management is still practicing traditional uh, management ways, and this might be a hindrance or an obstacle to being able to bounce back our business, given social distancing will be implemented in the entire year. So what might be your thoughts on that in terms of how HR can really influence management so that we're able to implement these practical examples onto the new normal?
Okay, so this is really about us having that business savviness of appreciating and understanding our business. So first and foremost, we have to speak the language and understand where are we going. What's the business strategy? So if our line managers are still thinking that the 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 business will still come from the traditional business, then recognize that, but our role is to prepare them for any opportunity. So talk to them. Let's not try to say that, hey, we know better in terms of what is the operating business model. Talk to them, really have a heart to heart talk on how do you want to go. I'm sorry, and where do you want to bring the business, and then start probing. Sorry. Start probing, and then once you see where their vision is, then translate that, oh my god, translate that into a people strategy. Okay. Transition the organization in such a way that some people are still in the traditional business model, but start looking at, how can I create an opportunity for people to embrace new skill sets, either through my buy strategy, which is my talent acquisition, through my build strategy, which is my training and development, and through my borrow strategy, which is probably something that, I need to borrow from SAP, I need to borrow from all of these specialists where I don't need them for the long term, but I need them now. So maybe even in your hallway, no, not hallway, even in your because there's no hallway anymore to speak of, even in your normal, discussion with your maybe sales marketing people or sales head or marketing head, then you can start putting in ideas, sparks of ideas to think about, why don't you start thinking about a new business model? If you're in manufacturing, what about lights out? Okay. Have you started looking at that instead of, continuously looking at a business where manpower is driven by the plant workers staying in the manufacturing site? Uh, there are companies like I would imagine Kikoman in Japan who's already embracing a lights out. So preparing that is the way to future proof the organization, but it doesn't have to happen now. You just need to prepare the organization to start looking at those. So how do you do that? Network, work with the different HR, what is their business model, and then start appreciating, oh, I think we can do that. Something that is happening in the automotive industry can also be applied in a pharmaceutical industry, as long as we know how to network, and then start thinking outside the box and say this can be applied, anywhere.
Indeed, I think it's an excellent time for us to really put that collaborative spirit into
Absolutely.
mode so that we collaborate within our organizations with the other business function heads so that we can influence the way they think and influence directions, as well as collaborate with the bigger world of the HR industry. We've actually gone 10 minutes over time. And I'd like at
Okay.
this point to thank Miss Telma for
Thank you.
generously sharing her time, her wisdom and expertise. I'm sure there are a lot more questions that our participants would now want to bring up because, as we keep this discussion going, we, with the new normal that we're trying to shape, there will always be questions that we will encounter along the way. And what's important is that we keep learning so that in this way we keep growing and, be agile. Some things that may work this week or this month, the scenario changes, and all of a sudden we need to change directions and we need to stay connected. So on that
Absolutely.
note, yeah, please keep joining the PMUP webinars. I'm sure there will be other opportunities for you to hear from Ms. Telma as well as our other speakers. There's one more coming up this afternoon, and to which we'd like to invite you. Take a look at the PMUP website and you would see there are several schedules up ahead of the topics that we have. So on that note,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much everyone for coming to this
Thank you
session.
very
Thank you,
much.
Ms. Telma, and have a great day ahead, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.